Gender-based violence is an alarming issue when it occurs in different countries, regions, and territories around the world. Gender-based violence is simply the depriving a woman of her basic rights together with that of her social, economic, and political rights. According to the UNDP, 35% of women around the world are said to have been subjected to some form of physical and sexual violence. Gender-based violence is everyone's business. Therefore, it is also correct to state that men are also victims of domestic violence or gender-based violence. Therefore, in this episode, we aim to share with you some reasons or the causes as to why gender-based violence exists in our society today, together with why perpetrators of violence turn to domestic violence as a means of dealing with internal conflict. What is gender-based violence? It is violence that is directed at an individual based on his or her biological sex or gender identity. It includes physical, sexual, verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse, threats, coercion, and economic or educational deprivation, whether occurring in public or private life. In Papua New Guinea, the issue of gender-based violence has raised alarm bells as despite the legislation that is in place, women and girls continue to find themselves trapped in a vicious cycle of violence and abuse. According to the Development Policy Centre of the Australian National University, 70% of women and girls in PNG are said to have experienced some form of physical or sexual assault in their lifetime, that it has now been of grave importance that issues of gender-based violence must be addressed.
As Secretary General of the Pacific Island Forum, it's very important to me and to the management of the Secretariat that we have a safe workplace for all our staff. A safe workplace, particularly for our women, where they are not harassed, that their productivity levels are good, and that they feel safe. It's a fundamental right to have a safe working place. For women in our countries in the Pacific, it is also very important that they have safe working places, whether it's in offices or in marketplaces, so that their opportunity for economic empowerment is sustained, that they contribute to our societies and particularly to our families, that they feel safe at home and that they feel safe in the workplace. Here at the Pacific Island Forum Secretariat, we have our own policies ensuring that there is no room for sexual harassment. And I would urge that all institutions have policies to protect women so that they work in a safe environment. Working in a safe environment will mean that our productivity levels will be good and that we build strong partnerships with our male counterparts to serve the people of the Pacific.
What are some of the causes of gender-based violence and why? Eddie Isla, an active advocate who advocates towards the changing of mindset among our men in PNG and dealing with societal pressures, shares sentiments behind the need for change of mindsets, but also poses reasons as to why there is a need for such.
My name is Eddie Isla. I am the founder of Warrior Culture. I'm actually a life and business coach, so I run a couple of ventures, but Warrior Culture is one of them, where we empower our participants, usually men, to overcome family sexual violence and become leaders and advocates in the space of advocating against family sexual violence. Yeah, sure. It was founded in 2013 as a result of the national house cry. I don't know if many people will remember late Kapari Leniata was burnt alive in Hagen. And then there was a big national house cry at Sir John Gay Stadium here in Port Moresby, and everyone was focusing on men. And I guess how I look at it is, the way we talk about family sexual violence is Joe is beating up Mary today, for example. Then tomorrow we'll say Joe beat up Mary, and as time goes on we'll say Mary got beat up by Joe. And then as time goes on even more, Mary's a battered woman. And so all the services are focused on Mary, which is good. She needs assistance. She's a victim. But who is Joe hurting in 4 weeks' time or as time goes on? So basically the statistics say 2 out of 3 women will experience family sexual violence, which equates to, according to my rough calculations, 2.3 million women in Papua New Guinea. So I guess why we started was 2.3 million men in our minds needed assistance to empower themselves and to overcome family sexual violence so that they can stop perpetrating. That's the crux of why we started. I think fundamentally when you go into any GBV or family sexual violence training, at the center of any kind of violence is a desire to control another person or persons. Underlying that, which may not be talked about a lot, is why would someone try and control someone? It's because of fear. That's the emotion that's actually triggering off the desire to control. Because when you're scared, and most people, when we are faced with situations, whether they're relationships or external situations, where we feel we are unable to control that particular environment or circumstance, we resort to anything that we can to try and control it, whether it's verbal abuse or in some instances physical violence, if you aren't able to manage your mindset and emotions. So in my mind, underlying all kinds of violence, not just family sexual violence, are poor beliefs which trigger off this feeling of fear. And three responses to fear: fight, flight, or freeze. And physical violence is just the manifestation of the fight response. When someone's feeling scared. It's a deeper conversation, but in a nutshell, that's what it is. So firstly, I'd like to state that men are just as emotional. And as I mentioned in the previous response, it's the inability to manage fear. So the fact that they're feeling fear and they need to control a situation demonstrates that they're just as emotional. But there's also, I guess, beliefs, comes back to beliefs around sharing and talking about issues. You might not be a man, or you might not be a strong person, so men find it hard to share. They've got to be macho and strong and so forth. So that definitely leads to, I guess, a lot of pressure building up internally.
Please stay with us as Eddie from the Warrior Culture speaks more on gender-based violence together with representatives from the Women's Lawyers Association. Is enough being done to address issues of gender-based violence? And if so, is the issue addressed? Does that mean dealing effectively with perpetrators of violence?
I guess for the reasons you mentioned, perpetrators of violence, I will probably add to that. I will say that men often perpetrate physical violence, but in terms of looking at domestic violence and family sexual violence, I'm actually gonna say that men and women are perpetrating high levels of domestic violence. And when you look at the Family Protection Act, it's not just physical abuse they're talking about, it's verbal, it's psychological abuse, it's which includes texts and verbal abuse, all that kind of stuff. And I would say women included, as well as men, society is perpetrating really, really high levels of violence. But in terms of physical, definitely, men are doing it because basically they're bigger than women, so they know that a woman won't or can't respond in that manner. I think it's purely to do with size in terms of the perpetration of physical violence. Otherwise, all the other types of violence are being perpetrated. I guess as a life coach myself, life and business coach, on the life coaching side of things, I've had to go through an intense period in my life as a former perpetrator, where I had you got to do a lot of soul searching and come back to yourself. I got a whole lot of counseling and coaching to unpack some of these beliefs that I grew up thinking were normal and so forth, growing up in Papua New Guinea, so in an average PNG household. And that's in Port Moresby. Now that's not out in the rural, so I didn't grow up in the village, so I have no idea about living there as a child growing up. but certainly I had to unpack all of my beliefs. So coaching, counseling, meditation, prayer, all of these things help. I do a lot of meditation because it helps still the mind so that the mind can, I guess, rationalize and can see itself getting angry. This is something that most people aren't doing because people aren't conscious, people aren't awake. People are just blindly reacting, going through things, thinking that other people, their partners, control their feelings. So in a nutshell, men need to wake up, but how do you do that? Things like going to church, meditation, prayer, exercise, even gardening. When you garden, the mind slows down and you're taking care of flowers and all that kind of stuff, or even raising pets and so forth. That helps. I mean, the prison systems overseas have shown that looking after animals assists with developing a sense of love and care and so forth. Anything that slows the mind down and helps the mind to rationalize and contemplate. I think around the world there's so many, and even here in Papua New Guinea, there's so many examples of that, of men changing. There's so many good role models, and I think change is part of the human journey. So not many people they stay the same. I think a handful of people do, but there's two reasons why someone would change. Either there's been a lot of pain or they've identified pleasure in changing. In my mind, they're the two motivating reasons that someone would change, and Anthony Robbins, world-renowned life coach, talks about it. If a person is getting away with domestic violence, male or female, in this case we're talking about men, if nothing happens to them, they'll keep going until they experience some kind of pain that forces them to give up those beliefs or actions. And then that pain will shift their belief, which in turn will shift their behavior. But until that point, nothing's going to change. Or the other reason is pleasure. If they get some kind of immense benefit from changing. So I think that's one thing that people aren't realizing or talking about, that there's a whole psychology behind changing behavior. And those two things need to be discussed and understood in order for men or anyone to change.
Joining in unison with the efforts carried out to address the issue of GBV is the Women Lawyers Association, in which one of its objectives is to address and provide legal assistance to victims of GBV.
The PNG Women Lawyers Association was established about 3-4 years ago. It was left dormant in the last 2 years when the new executives under Mrs. Pauline Mogish got elected to office. We started progressing work again on the objectives of the association, and one of the primary objectives of the association is to be a voice for women and children, and men as well, who otherwise would not have a voice, and also to provide legal services where we could, in terms of pro bono services to them. Because as we all know, the Public Solicitor's Office, the legal aid desk, is quite inundated at the moment. And so one wouldn't blame them for not having the time and capacity to deal with or assist our people who really do need legal aid, because a lot of people say legal fees are extravagant. And so one of our main objectives is to assist in that area. And I think we've been having conversations like you people have in the last year or two about what we can do to address as a body, as the women lawyers body. How do we address and impact on efforts to maybe not eliminate, but at least help the numbers, the statistics on GBV-related crimes?
That would be one that would be unassessed in terms of statistics and figures. We don't have that in front of us. But there's a possibility that because of social media that's now more more established amongst in our communities, the prevalence of it is being reported. It may be the case that before that there was always a high rate of it. However, no reports on it because we didn't have the means, social media, other means of advertising or making public the fact that GBV has always been in our societies, our communities. So that is a question that I think can be backed up by statistics. We're not sure if it's more prevalent now than before, or it's being more reported now than before, and has always been there in high amounts, in high levels. That's
Better reporting now.
Yeah, it may be because it's better reporting. We're seeing it more.
The numbers are alarming. Like UN said, I mean, the UN states that 2 out of every 3 women in PNG, on average, has experienced GBV. And a recent, like, as Shine a Light Vigil, the numbers that were stated, 68%, that's consistent with the UN, and 61% of that do not tell anyone or do not report it. For us as an association, we've also started some collaborative work with the PNG Women Doctors Association. We've done a bit of review of this, the policy, the GBV policy, because a lot of us are working in, working in our own space. I think one of the challenges that we identified from last week's meeting with the PNG Women Doctors Association was that we need evidence-based conversations and evidence-based intervention. Everybody knows that GBV is it's a national concern. And it's fast decaying, our society. So what do we need to do? But we need evidence-based conversations and intervention. On my way here, a friend from UNDP called and said, this is a major concern. We need the GBV Secretariat up and running. Well, the Women's Support Secretariat. We need budgetary allocation for it from government. That hasn't even started yet. And they also need to review the policy itself to see what will work and what won't work, or what has worked and is working. But for us as an association, we've also discussed legal aid as a short-term initiative that we can get started with immediately, and with support from the law school, we could go a long way in the LTI.
Yeah, that's still in discussion stage.
That's still in discussion stage, but something we need
to develop. Perhaps a place where we can give legal service and also counseling
safe house.
in a safe house. So that's the long term.
Coming up next, we explore your views on gender-based violence. What are your thoughts?
Okay, now this country emos time long if nedem God been creating man pastime. God been creating man pastime na and been create Rouse Reefs lo man na and been creating Mary. Na all get the time mibla all man by mibla by respecting merit as well because long attitude na tintin blom mibla salugi mo sa mol Mary na sawe guanani lo tintin blom bla na olin sawe kam lo tintin blom blo sam wanan tintin mibla by like mol lo megim long and all na sa megin na planti o sa mibla sa crossfire na mibla sa fight mol na mibla tingo sa mibla man mibla mona mibla got more strong now some all get the time mibla sa waigis mol na fight mol na display am narbla story mi story.
I think that gender-based violence is both give and take thing, like all married to must have respect all man, and there's to be respect between a husband and a wife where that ladies are harmless, they can't hurt, but sometimes the guys on man they're very short temper and they easily harm women. But okay, it has to be both way thing. Like that you marry, you suppose your husband is that kind of guy. I think you come in a way where when something about can cross or maybe sit down slowly, talk about things, and then it's a very big thing. It's a very big issue now in the country, and I think because in Mr. City, it's we can see it clearly. But if we can make more awareness into the villages and the settlements, where I believe it's really big issue in the villages and the one communities where law and order going too much. So I mean we need more awareness on these things where true, like it's already a big issue in the nation, believe me, where it's much causing a lot of problems in the community level. So as I said, men are wrong. Like sometimes we just have to get down and listen to what the women say, and then we sit down, we talk things over. Then you just get up, now you bail out, whether you wrong or you right, you just fight him all. That's all, which is not good.
From my point of view and from my view, I could say that for gender-based violence within our communities and within our society, within our country, we need to implement more laws to safeguard our women, our country women, which has been going through many violence within homes and within the communities. And what I know is that many women are still under problem through abuse and violence domestically, at home and on the streets. Our women has been abused by our countrymen. A lot of women have been, abused. And what I really am suggesting is that the government should come up with implementing stronger laws to safeguard our women. There are already stakeholders and some other marriage safety council offices already been established within the city, within the country, but we need to really extend it out to the rural areas as well, and within these suburbs of this city and other centers of Papua New Guinea.
Side law man, me can respect him all Mary, one him all work him, and then all Mary can respect him all man, so that me can share him thinking one time na. Sit down blom bla right. Mary thinking around blong a man thinking around blom me yet our time problem ba come up inside the family.
Thank you. Thinking blom me along this topic, violence against women. Look blom me mosem. You get Russian now grassani come up. But now that government make him law to or some bias law Mary to mas. Women establish side blom man to mas. So time you look him caught you go on block caught them by start off Loris lab where you fight him very long and no go federal or cause why this la problem come up. Legal system me just start from man fight him very long and all no go back lo detail long history long problem come up long and this la me bla film same or some bias to my same stuff lo side all Mary na time me bla go back to my same all biblically, all Mary must respect the man. Plenty violence come up. You look at him, all Mary no respect the man. Plenty man all no sa talk so. Lo lo expressive frustration lo all tormean na dislakain. But you look at him, tormean na passing all Mary make him man you way man by equal. Tas all man more stronger so time all lose man more Mary him. Background of physical damage also name talk but plenty damage all Mary sa cause him lo think na. Man. So law must equally weigh this law because all Mary physically also all bruise all some blood damage law skin blow no you may talk but all man all some plenty law head na psychologically all affected time all Mary biget or suppress him all this la kind so government law look this la na at least make him law again where he can strike him la balance. Otherwise, all man all no got way along. Sana bloris la country blimina defend him all the time come low violence against women. Law go one side to mas.
Mosem disla domestic violence minimum man Mary tuplo one time so him trouble out. Some time Mary kill man sa kill Mary too. Some normally you may look big law media every day Mary talk to mas. Mosem Papua New Guinea especially Papua New Guinea now me no look. Me man blow by newspaper so me look at him every day Mary talk Mary issue come up but Mary plenty mangi number school mangi last year, previous year number plenty all school mangi Mary stebi mole. All die number that is issue all kill him die. Mary issue me looking molong na hapim tumas. But you look custom na one employee lo papon ini misa was you got custom too. Man sa leadim tok lo community one na man ga strong. Mary tui ga strong lo side lo white man but lo custom side na Melanesian side lo papon ini misa was Mary ga liglik strong antap lo man em moli mol ga pawan em dominate community. But tok pasin lo white man igam now. Karim lo Mary ga mantap so em balance man na Mary. But big place you now me look him. You mean it lo put him strong bla lo. Lo blo man too much strong. Suppose man kill him Mary. Lo blo Mary too much strong. Time Mary kill him man. You know Mary am no strong ya so am no sa kill him man no. Mary now am the prime minister. Mary still Mary working more than something. You mean no gonna issue lo Mary too. Mary too much kiss him strong bla lo. Man too much kiss him strong bla lo namba. You mean balance him this lo blo pa warning ni. Am ting blo me lo ya. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. Unfortunately, that is all we have for you in this episode of Women's World. Our next week's episode is a follow-up from this week's episode where we will be sharing with you avenues together with help that is available for victims of gender-based violence. If you would like to know more about our program or if you would like to be featured here on our program with a story of your own, please contact us through the link that is appearing on your screen now, simply by liking our Facebook page and sending us a message. Until next time, I am Miriam Rakone. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Women's World.